So this year for the Grizzlies has been, let's say, turbulent. Not a whole lot of fun stuff for Grizzlies fans this season, so instead, we're gonna go back to a different time, a time embodied by a single phrase, grit and grind.
In an era where you had the Warriors coming up, teams were shooting more threes, you saw small ball lineups, this Grizzlies team was just a breath of fresh air. They played inside, they played tough, and they would suffocate teams on defense.
Before we start talking about the grit and grind Grizzlies, if you haven't already, make sure to leave this video a like, give us a subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on one of our videos. But first, a word from the sponsor of today's video, Factor. Now, like most guys in their mid-20s, I love me some good food. Only two problems with that. Number one, I can't cook. And number two, the few things that I can cook, they generally take me forever, and they aren't always the best. So thank God for the sponsor of today's video, Factor. Factor is a meal delivery service that offers fresh, never frozen, ready-to-eat meals that make eating better every day easy. Factor offers pre-prepared, chef-crafted, and dietitian-approved meals with over 35 different options a week to choose from, including keto, calorie smart, vegan and veggies, and many more. They offer flexibility that fits your specific needs, so you can order as much or as little as you need. Prep is a breeze, simply poke a few holes to ventilate, heat for 2 minutes, and you're ready to go. For today's meal, Ben went with the blackened salmon with smoked Gouda cauliflower grits and broccoli, and I went with the roasted garlic chicken with green beans and sour cream and onion mashed potatoes. Like I said, poke a couple holes, heat them up for 2 minutes, and you're ready to enjoy some delicious food. There's no prep, no mess, and the only cleanup we had to do is because we overfilled our martini glasses.
Cut!
So if you want to enjoy some delicious, fresh, and never frozen meals, head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code synthetic50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and free wellness shots for life. 2 free wellness shots from 3 available flavors for every order you're an active subscriber. Once again, that's factor75.com. Use code synthetic50 for 50% off your first Factor box and free wellness shots for life. And thank you again to Factor for sponsoring today's video. So just a quick little recap of the Grizzlies' history prior to the grit and grind era. The Grizzlies are actually tied with the Raptors for the second youngest franchise in the NBA, although this is kind of BS because for some reason the NBA considers the Pelicans to have been the youngest, being founded in 2002, even though they very obviously relocated from Charlotte. I don't know, just a dumb NBA thing.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't the Thunder be the youngest then?
Or
whatever.
Or Brooklyn.
Yeah, Brooklyn as well.
So they were founded in 95, and like all expansion teams in sports, pretty much all expansion teams, they were terrible, and they were kind of hindered by some new NBA rules. The NBA didn't allow both the Grizzlies and the Raptors to get the first pick in the NBA draft or use their full salary cap for their first couple years, and there's a pretty good reason why, and it was the Orlando Magic, because they drafted Shaq in what, their 4th year of existence?
Yeah, and then I think like the next year they got the first pick again and got Penny Hardaway, so...
And the next year they were in the finals.
Yeah, so that's not really fair, but at the same time to those new teams, not only can you not get the first pick, you can't even use the full salary cap. That is brutal to a team just starting out.
And it resulted in them winning 56 games total in their first 4 seasons.
Imagine you're just like, you know, new team in town, you've been an NBA fan for a while, you finally got your hometown team, and then you just go to games, you got some season tickets, and just see that for 4 seasons.
Yeah, in the lockout shortened season, they went 8-42.
God damn!
Fortunes started to flip a little bit in the 2001 NBA draft. They landed Pau Gasol on draft night. Gasol won Rookie of the Year, and by his 3rd season, he had led the Grizzlies to the playoffs. So in 2004, they win 50 games. They make the playoffs as the 6th seed. You know, they're swept by the Spurs, but keep in mind, they had been god-awful pretty much their entire existence. So 50 wins and a playoff berth, that's a huge step up.
Yeah, shout out Pau Gasol. Maybe a guy that gets a little bit lost in history throughout the years, at least his time in the Grizzlies, but dude is a great player, and the fact he won 50 games with this franchise, that says something. In 2005 and 2006, the Grizzlies again would make the playoffs, but they were swept both times by the Spurs and the Mavericks. I mean, the Spurs and the Mavericks during that era, tough to beat. So they failed to win a playoff game, not just a series, in their first 3 playoff appearances.
0-12.
That is brutal.
They couldn't get one.
At least they were making it.
The Texas teams hated Memphis.
Yeah.
In 2006-07, though, you know, Gasol, he missed a decent chunk of the season with a broken foot, but, you know, he still put up 20 and 10. Mike Miller had his best season as a pro, and young Rudy Gay was showing flashes of the star he would one day become. And the Grizzlies were horrible. They won 22 games. And even with the best odds to get the first pick, they pulled a Pistons and landed the 4th pick.
To be fair to them though, great selection taking Mike Conley with the 4th pick. A lot better than what the Blazers got. They got the first pick.
Took his teammate.
Yeah, got a different player out of Ohio State, Greg Oden, who would not play very much, and Mike Conley would go down. We'll talk about him later.
He's still going.
Yeah, maybe the best player in franchise history in a way, or he's up there at least.
Even with Conley though, the Grizzlies didn't improve much. They only won 22 games, but Rudy Gay broke out as a 20-point per game scorer. That was basically the only positive from this season because they trade away Pau Gasol at midseason to the Los Angeles Lakers. They got back Kwame Brown, Javaris Crittenton, Aaron McKee, the rights to a young Marc Gasol, as well as 2 first-round picks. A trade that in hindsight is not the worst, but at the time it was seen as horrifically one-sided.
Even then, I mean, just on paper, like even kind of disregard the Marc Gasol part. 2 first-round picks, I mean, at least it's some. I don't think this trade is just god-awful. Let's say Marc Gasol never turned out to be anything. 2 first-round picks for Pau Gasol, it's all right.
It is funny though, there's a very infamous clip of Stephen A. Smith's reaction to this news, which was basically just an excuse for him to go off on Kwame Brown.
Kwame Brown is gone. The City of Angels, Hollywood, just should be celebrated. Throw a parade already, whether you win a championship or not. This man was a bona fide scrub. He can't play. No disrespect whatsoever, but I'm sorry to tell everybody the truth. The man cannot play the game of basketball.
So they landed the 5th pick in the draft, and they selected Kevin Love out of UCLA. A great pick. Kevin Love would turn out to be a great NBA player. Only problem is they flipped him for the 3rd overall pick, OJ Mayo. And OJ Mayo, you know, was okay in the NBA throughout his time. He's a great talent, but never really led up to anything. But just kind of a disaster because you draft Kevin Love and you trade him, and you also pass up on Russell Westbrook. So you lose 2 superstar level players, and you get back OJ Mayo, who's just a fine player.
Of the 3 prospects to come out of the LA area, they picked by far the worst one.
Yeah, they did, and it's weird because OJ Mayo as a high school player was supposed to be the next Jordan, but it didn't happen, obviously.
08-09, again, the Grizzlies were terrible. They only won 24 games, and in January of that year, they fired Marc Iverson. I don't know. I'm not going to try on that one. I know I bungled it. Just let it go. They fired him, and they hired Lionel Hollins to be their permanent head coach 3 days later. They did make kind of another mistake. They traded away a young Kyle Lowry to the Houston Rockets in February, but at that point, it was either him or Mike Conley, and they chose Mike Conley. So despite winning only 24 games that season, the Grizzlies, you know, they were showing some promise.
Yeah, you got Rudy Gay, who had another solid season. OJ Mayo, as a rookie, 18 points per game, so he started out hot. Mike Conley was progressing as the team's starting point guard. And then Marc Gasol, the 2nd round pick, just a throw in that Pau Gasol trade, he was starting to develop into something.
So the Grizzlies, you know, future was looking bright, but they completely bungled the 2009 NBA draft, and they're not the only ones. The Knicks and the Timberwolves very infamously bungled this draft too, but the Grizzlies were picking 2nd, and it's just kind of bad timing for them because it seemed like they had their backcourt set with OJ Mayo and Mike Conley, so they took 7'2" Hasheem Thabeet out of UConn. Yeah, the problem was Thabeet would go down as one of the biggest busts in NBA history, and oh yeah, the Grizzlies only passed on James Harden and Stephen Curry to take him.
Yeah, no hate on Hasheem Thabeet. He played like 20 games of the Blazers, but that dude's got to be the most uncoordinated player I've ever seen touch a basketball.
Oh, he's up there.
Like, he was great in college and everything, but in the pros,
because he was massive in college.
Jesus Christ. The dude could do basically nothing.
And like I said, it's just horrible timing.
It really is.
Because they're like, okay, we just got our backcourt of the future. We don't need guards. And all of a sudden, 2 generational guards come up in the draft.
And you think about the Grizzlies, later on we'll talk about, they had great defenses. They were kind of just missing that like ISO heavy scorer, a great shooter. James Harden and Steph Curry would have been pretty nice.
It's why you always draft on talent. I don't care if the Blazers already had Clyde Drexler. You take Mike, god damn it.
A little less than a month later, they kind of fixed things at least a little bit. There was a bright spot. They traded for Zach Randolph, and all they had to give up was Quentin Richardson, just straight up. That's all it took for the Clippers to send Zebo out.
I mean, Zebo had, let's call it a reputation at the time.
He did.
So the 2009-2010 season, this really was the breakout year for the Grizzlies. But before we get into all the good stuff, a quick little footnote, this was actually the year that the Grizzlies signed Allen Iverson. They signed him in September of 2009. Iverson said, "God chose Memphis as the place that I will continue my career."
He was spitting. No,
Really?
No, he was not at all. Because just like in Detroit, Iverson hated coming off the bench, and he left the team on November 7th. NBA season usually starts like what, late October, so he played only 3 games for the Grizzlies. I don't know if God had that in his plans. He was cooking up, yeah, you're gonna continue here, but you're only gonna play 3 games.
I mean, did he really think he was starting over Mike Conley?
He probably thought that.
I guess. The addition of Zach Randolph, though, was an instant success. I mean, at the time, Zebo, everyone knew he was a great player, but he didn't have the best reputation. I mean, he had some well-documented incidents with the Blazers, couldn't make it work with Stephon Marbury in New York, and he had a pretty terrible year with the Clippers in LA. But my God, he was the perfect fit for this team.
Yeah, this was weird to see as a Blazer fan. The first ever team, I watched Zebo, and he was fine for us, but yeah, didn't have the best reputation. If you think about it, if he never had this resurgence with the Grizzlies, people would look at him a lot differently these days.
Yeah, and he averaged 21 points, 12 boards a game, made his first All-Star game, and the rest of the Grizzlies core, I mean, Gay, Mayo, Gasol, Conley, none of them had huge jumps in their numbers, but they all improved. And I mean, the Grizzlies winning 40 games, up from 24, I mean, that's a 16-game improvement.
And they still missed the playoffs by 10 games.
Western Conference.
Not even like remotely close. How many times, how many videos have we said, oh, because the Western Conference, they missed the playoffs? God.
And we're gonna keep saying it.
Yeah, we will keep saying it. It will never stop. So coming off an excellent season, the Grizzlies, they were really trending up, and they followed that up by drafting Xavier Henry with the 12th pick. They didn't miss out on a ton. I guess they could have had Avery Bradley, but I mean, whatever.
Plus, Xavier Henry missed basically his entire first season with a knee sprain, so
that's tough.
Basically, they didn't pick anyone in the draft that first year, at least.
But they made up for it in free agency. First, they re-signed Rudy Gay to a 5-year, $82 million contract. That's fine, but Tony Allen, 3-year, $10 million? With the contracts we'll hear about today, that just doesn't look real.
I mean, getting the best perimeter defender in the NBA for $3.3 million a year.
And he's a guy already with the Boston Celtics, has championship experience, knows how to play on a great defense. One of my favorite role players in NBA history. A+ from the front office on that one.
And yet they didn't have a great start.
That's weird.
It is really weird. I mean, you'd think coming off a great season, you win 40 games, you exceed all the expectations in the world, you lock up Rudy Gay, you bring in Tony Allen, and you're 3 games under 500 at midseason. I mean, Rudy Gay had a buzzer beater against the Heat early in the season, which was pretty impressive, but other than that, pretty disappointing start to the season.
It happens, the West is tough, but let's give them some credit. They turned it around. Over the next 16 games, they go 12-4. They did a 31-26 record at the All-Star break. And 3 things to note leading up to the All-Star break. First, you had OJ Mayo was suspended 10 games, testing positive for steroids.
A first of many.
OJ Mayo was just always on some bullshit.
He was always on the juices when he was always on.
He had so much talent as a player, but I don't know, he couldn't get it right in the mind. He was always doing something just random.
Yeah, and on February 8th, with OJ Mayo still suspended and Rudy Gay out injured, Tony Allen got the start against the Oklahoma City Thunder, and he only went out and dropped 27 points, had 5 steals and 3 blocks in a road win in Oklahoma City. And in the post-game interview, Tony Allen coined the term grit and grind. Candidly, I don't think there's ever been a more apt description for a team in NBA history.
Hey, I love it. We talked about in the Lob City retrospective how Blake just kind of came up with it out of nowhere. I like how the players come up with like the nicknames for the teams.
Yeah.
And they're just random. It's not like they're crafting this in their mind. They just come up with it off the dome.
Yeah, maybe Allen was in his hotel room scheming. You don't know.
It's like next time I almost drop 30 and I get an interview, I'm bringing this up.
The first time I get that post-game interview, I've been cooking this for months. Disaster, though, kind of seemed to strike on February 15th, though, as Rudy Gay dislocated his left shoulder and he missed the rest of the season with an injury. Just brutal. I mean, you got this young team that's very clearly on the way up. They're finally improving, and then to lose one of their star players mid-season just sucks.
Yeah, we've been through it as Blazer fans, like early on those Roy days. Young teams, and then you get the injuries. It's so brutal. It sucks.
Grizzlies were busy at the trade deadline, though. They dumped Hasheem Thabeet, Damari Carroll, and a first-round pick that eventually became Andre Roberson to the Rockets for Shane Battier and Ish Smith. And this was kind of a cool full-circle moment because in 2006, the Grizzlies had actually originally acquired Rudy Gay by trading Battier to the Rockets. So that's kind of a neat little moment right there.
Yeah, that's neat. And Shane Battier just looks good in that Grizzlies uniform.
Oh, he looks great in a Grizzlies uniform.
It needed to come back. And they almost traded OJ Mayo. A little bit of a weird story here. They were in talks with the Pacers for a deal revolved around Josh McRoberts and their 2011 first-round pick. It's tough to tell like what exactly happened. It's one of those things no one will really know. Some say they missed the deadline, so the deal didn't go through, and then some say the Grizzlies pulled out. Who knows? That would have been an interesting pick, especially because Pacers used that draft pick on Kawhi Leonard,
who they also traded.
They just didn't want Kawhi.
They didn't want Kawhi for some reason.
Yeah, we don't want this guy.
The Grizzlies, though, they continue to improve even without Rudy Gay. They finished the year 46-36. That was actually good enough for the 8th seed this time.
Okay.
Only problem was they were matched up with the 61-win San Antonio Spurs in round 1.
That's brutal. That is brutal. But at least in game 1, you know, Manu was out with that elbow injury, and Gasol and Zebo just ate down low against Duncan and Antonio McDyess. Like, I can see eating down low against Antonio McDyess. He was old and washed up at this point.
But against Timmy D?
But against Timmy, I guess it's too much to handle. Yeah, Gasol and Zebo, he can only guard one of them. But goddamn, impressive from that Grizzlies front court.
Yeah, Gasol 24 points, 9 boards. Zebo 25 points, 14 boards. Shane Battier hit a 3 to give the Grizzlies the lead with 24 seconds left. Tony Allen hit 2 more free throws, and then Richard Jefferson, my God. They don't come more wide open than this shot, and he f***ing bricks it.
Dude was almost like too wide open. I think it's part of the problem.
He had too long to think about it.
And how about this? The Grizzlies, you know their fans were hyped. First playoff win in their franchise.
On the road at the best team in the NBA.
Yeah, it couldn't have come sweeter than that as the AC and everything.
After the Spurs swept him twice in the mid-2000s.
That's storybook.
Game 2, though, Manu was back in the lineup. Even still, with him back, it was another incredibly close back-and-forth game. 12 lead changes. The Spurs managed to pull away a little bit at the end. Like the Grizzlies, they never had the ball down 1 possession after the 4-minute mark. But I think what made this series a lot of fun to watch is that both teams really played that like similar team-focused style of basketball. Like in this game, both teams had 5 guys in double figures.
Yeah, they both had a ton of players that could score a bit, but they didn't have like one ISO guy. And I just love the Southwest Division during this era. Like you had obviously the Spurs and Grizzlies like we talked about. You had the Mavericks. So many great matchups, and there was quite a few playoff matchups as well. So very entertaining series.
Yeah, Spurs pick up a 6-point win. Heading to Memphis for game 3. The Grizzlies actually built up a 15-point lead in the second quarter. Spurs fought back, tied the game with 8 minutes to go, but the Grizzlies made the plays down the stretch, and Zach Randolph, of all players, hit a fucking rainbow 3 with 42 seconds left, put the Grizzlies up 5. Spurs actually got the ball back with under 10 seconds to play, had a chance to tie the game with a 3. They didn't even get a shot off.
You gotta get a shot off.
Especially the Spurs.
Yeah, you wouldn't. That's the last team you'd expect to mess that up. Game 4, Spurs led most of the first half. They had a 2-point lead going to halftime, and Tony Parker played like the first half of his life. 19 points on 7-7 shooting. The dude was perfect. Problem is, the second half, I don't know what that halftime speech was, but the Grizzlies just dominated.
Lionel Hollins gave one hell of a speech. Spurs got outscored 56-36, and the Grizzlies turned a close game into a 104-86 beatdown. It took a 3-1 lead on the 61-win Spurs.
You know, the fan base is just hyped as hell. They're like, we're finally winning the playoff series, one of the biggest upsets of all time. And then game 5,
I almost got it done.
Yeah, all-time playoff game, 3-1. If they win this, they advance. Spurs jump out to a 15-point lead, but the Grizzlies battled back, took a 3-point lead with 1.7 seconds left. You need one stop,
and you don't get it
because Gary Neal.
I mean, that's just one of those Spurs players making plays like they do.
It's a shame that this just never gets brought up because the Spurs didn't win the series or anything, but that shot is crazy.
Oh, it's a tough-ass shot.
Yeah.
Spurs pull away in overtime, so the Grizzlies don't get it done in 5 on the road. They gotta come back home, and they almost immediately built a 14-point lead in this game. Spurs, though, they closed the gap. They stayed within striking distance for the majority of the game. They actually took the lead with just under 5 to play. Grizzlies, though, they immediately responded with an 8-0 run. They took the lead for good. They won 99-91, became the 4th 8 seed in NBA history to beat a 1 seed. First playoff series win in franchise franchise history, and this wasn't a fluke. Like, it wasn't like the Spurs had guys out. Like, they just straight up lined up and were the better team over 6 games.
Yeah, if you think about the Grizzlies roster, like, the team is built for the playoffs. They kind of had that slow style. This is before really the three-point era. They could kind of just muck up the game, grind it down. You got Tony Allen, Marc Gasol. So it's not shocking looking back, but at the time, for a team that's never won a playoff game, let alone a series, incredible. I'm sure the franchise, the fan base, everyone in Memphis was just partying after this.
I mean, they just wore the Spurs down. Like, they just suffocated them like a boa constrictor.
And what do they get for winning this series in the next round? They got to play an up-and-coming Thunder team with Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden.
And the Grizzlies said, that up-and-coming Thunder team, because they went in Oklahoma City in game 1 and pretty much dominated. The Thunder led 2-0 after 21 seconds and never led again.
I mean, again, it's Randolph and Gasol. Like, it's hard to handle both of them. They combined for 54 points and 23 rebounds.
Game 2, kind of the opposite. Russ and KD this time, they combined for 50. The Thunder restored order. Pretty much a wire-to-wire win for the Thunder. They led by as much as 20. They get a 9-point win. So going back to Memphis, 1-1. Thunder dominated most of game 3. They led by as many as 16, and they led by 13 going into the 4th. And the Grizzlies in the 4th quarter rallied all the way back, took the lead. Thunder eventually tied it though, and then Zach Randolph's 3 attempt at the buzzer was just off, so we go to overtime. And in OT, the Grizzlies, weirdly enough, got 12 free throws, and the Thunder got none.
You're probably not going to win a lot of games if that happens to you in overtime. I don't know what the stats are, but I'm going to say you're never going to win a game if that happens.
And sure enough, the Thunder did not win this game.
Yeah, they did not win. And then game 4, one of the best playoff games in the modern NBA. The Grizzlies, they led by as much as 17. They were looking great. Then the Thunder battled back and took a 10-point lead with under 5 minutes to play. And how about Mike Conley just hitting this crazy ass shot? The Grizzlies are down 3. They need a bucket. With 3.5 seconds left, he ties the game. And then Russ missed a buzzer beater to win the game. I gotta say, I know we're not talking about the Thunder, but why did Russ always take the last shot?
Because it was Russ.
He will always want, it's KD. He's one of the clutchest players ever. Give him the ball, but Russ is like, I gotta be the hero.
Yeah, but this was when KD was kind of in like his tentative phase where
yeah, that's true.
Russ was always shooting more than him. And sure enough, in this game, I think he takes 13 more shots than KD.
Of course.
That Mike Conley 3 though. That 3 hit the moon.
Yeah, he shot that so damn high.
First OT though, Thunder built a 6-point lead with about a minute to go, but the Grizzlies, they had a couple clutch threes, including this insane 3 by Grievous Vasquez, which, first of all, he's only in the game because Mike Conley had fouled out. Second of all, this is a horrible shot. There's like 10 seconds left in the game, and he takes this like off-balance one-handed shot, and he just swishes it.
Luckily, it went in, but it looked like he was trying to draw a foul or something. I can't tell what he was doing, to be honest, but it went in, so that's all that matters.
Durant actually got a chance to win the game in the first overtime, but he left it short, so we're on to OT number 2, and Russ, I mean, for as much hate as we'll give him, he was the leading man for OKC in the second overtime. He scored 7 of his team's 10 points. He had 40 for the entire game, although he did miss another buzzer beater, so we're going to a third overtime.
And yeah, again, that was not a good shot. Like, against Tony Allen, you're not hitting that.
Leaning?
Yeah, but whatever. Third overtime, Grizzlies went ice cold in the third overtime. Shot 1 of 9, and the Thunder pulled away for a 133-123 win. Brutal loss for the Grizzlies. You had the opportunity to go up 3-1, multiple overtimes to win it. You just can't quite get it done.
And then in game 5, they got hammered. 99-72.
Kind of predictable.
Yeah, really predictable, honestly. You lose a big heartbreaker in game 4. You go back on the road. 72 points, though?
Yeah, you got to do better. You got to do better.
I mean, I know this is 2011, but 72 points that's tough.
In game 6, it looked like the same thing was happening. The Thunder went up early. They led by double digits, but this Grizzlies team does not give up. In the second half, they hold the Thunder to only 29 points, and Zebo by himself nearly outscored the Thunder. He had 20 and 11, and the Grizzlies win 95-83, and we got a game 7 to decide the series. Trip to the Western Conference Finals on the line.
And this is where the run ended, because you know what? KD had an absolute masterclass in game 7. 39 points. Russ had a 14-point, 14 assists, 10 rebound triple-double. Thunder dominated 105-90. So the Grizzlies bow out in the second round in 7 games. Oklahoma City's off to the Western Conference Finals. But you know what? I think this is a better season than any Grizzlies fan could have thought possible. Definitely the best season in franchise history by far at this point.
Yeah, it was probably better than anything they could have thought of, because they they've never seen anything like it. Like, they couldn't even fathom actually winning a playoff series or winning a playoff game.
I was going to say, forget winning a playoff series. They'd never even seen them win a playoff game.
Yeah, so I'm sure, like, the optimism levels among this team, among fans in Memphis, had to be sky high at this moment.
And they did all this without Rudy Gay.
Yeah, so imagine you get your young, like, star-level player back, you get a scorer to help score more than 72 points in a Game 5. Like, they had to be hyped for next season.
So going into the 2011-2012 season, the Grizzlies, they didn't have a first-round pick, so they just drafted Josh Shelby with the 49th pick of the draft. Wouldn't have brought this up other than the fact that he was actually named co-MVP of the 2012 NBA Summer League. The other guy? Damian Lillard.
What?
I don't even know who the hell Josh Shelby is.
I don't either.
But okay.
But I remember Dame. Yeah, the Grizzlies basically returned the exact same roster from the season prior because, I mean, considering how well the prior season went, why the hell wouldn't you?
Yeah, but things did not start out the best. They started out 3-6, but then rip off 7 straight. That'll help you out to go to 10-6. But from then on, they were pretty inconsistent for most of the season, really until they found their rhythm late in the season, in late March and April. And really that was because of injuries. Darrell Arthur tore his ACL in September. Randolph slightly tore his MCL, only 4 games in this season, and he wouldn't return until March, and basically even when he returned, he was kind of a bench player. Even then, once they kind of got Zebo back, they had a strong end of the season, 16-4 in their final 20 games, going hot into the playoffs.
Yeah, Rudy Gay had some clutch as hell moments too. Had a game-tying 3 to send the game to OT against the Raptors on March 16th. Had a game-sealing block, unfortunately, on Wesley Matthews to beat the Blazers on April 21st. Interestingly enough, there were also some moments in the clutch where Rudy missed and then was saved by his teammates in back-to-back games. Dante Cunningham had a game-winning tip to beat the Denver Nuggets on February 17th after Rudy missed the shot. And then in the very next night, basically the exact same thing happens. Rudy has a shot to beat the Golden State Warriors, he misses, and Tony Allen gets the tip layup for the win.
Well, I'm sorry if there's any Rudy Gay fans out there, but there's gonna be some slander.
All 2 of you out there.
Yeah, he was one of those guys that thought he was way better than what he was. Like, I have a feeling those were some dumbass shots that he kind of, just got bailed out on.
He was a poor man's Melo.
He really was. Like that is so accurate.
A poor man's Nuggets Melo. Only one All-Star this year for the Grizzlies. It was Marc Gasol. Interestingly enough, Rudy Gay, who was the team's leading scorer, wasn't selected. I mean, this was back in the early 2010s, so slim pickings for All-Star bigs in the NBA around this time.
Yeah, and Marc Gasol, I guess they saw his defense. He was always good on defense, so I would say he deserved it. And then how about, the Iverson experiment failed? They signed Gilbert Arenas on March 20th to be a backup for Mike Conley. Also didn't really go well, but I guess it went better than Iverson, so there's that.
I mean, he lasted more than 3 games.
Oh yeah, so, it called a success.
During the season, the Grizzlies also debuted these throwback jerseys, these like green and yellow ones. I should like these because I really do like it when the NBA has, jerseys that don't match the color of the shorts. I kind of like, it's an interesting look we don't normally see. Also, they're green and yellow. Big points for that. I'm not really feeling them though.
Yeah, I'm not feeling them either. I mean, I shouldn't like them because they're green and yellow, and I don't like them, so it makes sense for me. I'm surprised you don't, but yeah, there's not much to them.
Grizzlies, though, would finish the season with a 41-25 record, good for the 4th best record in the West. They were matched up with the Los Angeles Clippers in the first round. The Clippers, the previous offseason, as you would know if you've seen our Lob City retrospective, they had added Chris Paul. It was Blake Griffin's 2nd year. They were one of the most talked about teams in the NBA at this time, and this was a really, really interesting matchup because you gotta remember, the Clippers traded away Zach Randolph because they knew they were going to draft Blake Griffin.
I love that. I just love this rivalry as a whole. The glitz and glam of LA, Lob City, and then versus grit and grind Grizzlies. It was amazing. NBA's missing stuff like this.
This was one of the defining rivalries of the early 2010s.
It really was.
Game 1 of this series, by far the most iconic game of this series. The Grizzlies dominated early, led by as much as 27. OJ Mayo hit a 3 to put the Grizzlies up 24 with 9:13 left in the 4th quarter. And from there, the Clippers would proceed to go on a 28-3 run. The Grizzlies lead was like so secure at the time that no one, like crowd, commentators, no one really realized what was happening until Nick Young hit that corner 3 that cut the lead to 9 with about 2.5 minutes left.
Let's give a shout out to the Clippers, a team that choked so often in the playoffs during this era.
A team that we have ruthlessly and relentlessly put down down.
At least they had this insane comeback. Nick Young would hit another three on the next possession from the exact same spot, and then the Clippers took the lead off a Reggie Evans layup with 50 seconds left. Just crazy.
Yeah, Rudy Gay hit a 10-foot jumper to give the Grizzlies the lead back, but then Chris Paul hit 2 free throws to give the Clippers the lead, and then on the final possession, Rudy Gay had one last-ditch attempt that was left short. Great defense, by the way, by an old-ass Kenyon Martin on the final play. One of the greatest comebacks in NBA playoff history. In fact, I think it's tied as the biggest fourth quarter comeback in NBA playoff history.
Yeah, and it really doesn't get brought up a lot because, like we said, that Clippers team was kind of known for choking and underperforming.
Game 2, much more by the book compared to Game 1. The Grizzlies led for most of the game after the first quarter. They actually had 6 players in double figures, led by Rudy Gay's 21 points. Funny note about this game is that the Clippers shot 9 of 16 from 3 compared to the Grizzlies 2 of 12 from 3, and they still lost.
Well, I mean, when you have 20 turnovers and 29 personal fouls, you're not going to win many games like that, even if you do shoot good from 3. Game 3, on the other hand, much more of a back and forth type game. 9 lead changes, 8 ties, classic just low scoring games from the 2010 playoffs. Gotta love those. And kind of just a sloppy, grinded out type game. A lot of turnovers, a lot of fouls from both teams. 17 turnovers for both teams and 26 fouls for the Grizzlies, 27 for the Clippers. We're definitely missing NBA games like that.
I mean, for reference, Indiana leads the NBA this year in fouls per game at 22.5.
Crazy.
Oh man, I used to love watching these old games between the Grizzlies and the Clippers where they just beat the shit out of each other for 60
amazing.
minutes. Oh, it's the best.
Clippers would rally back, trailing by 7 to start the fourth. They took a 6-point lead with 23 seconds left. And the Grizzlies, they almost rallied back themselves. Rudy Gay nearly put the team on his shoulders, hit 2 threes on back-to-back possessions, but his third attempt would fall, and the Clippers would prevail 87-86.
Game 4, another back and forth game. Chris Paul and Blake Griffin combined for 57 points, while Rudy Gay, Mike Conley, and Z-Bo combined for 60. Down the stretch, though, Chris Paul hit a layup to put the Clippers up 2. Z-Bo would go on to tie it at the line. And then on the very last play, Chris Paul just got clamped by Tony Allen and didn't even get a shot off.
Classic, just Tony Allen clamping up even the best. But Chris Paul would definitely get his revenge in overtime. He scored 8 of the Clippers' 14 points, and the Clippers would win 101-97 to take a 3-1 lead in the series.
Yeah, back in Memphis, Grizzlies trailing 3-1. They jumped out to a 14-point lead after the first quarter, led by as much as 24 in the game. Was never really close. The Clippers managed only 80 total points, which is hilarious considering a couple days ago the Lakers scored 87 in 1/2. I mean, the modern NBA is just, I like scoring as much as the next guy, but we might have to rein it in a little bit. Just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little. Game 6, once again, facing elimination. The Grizzlies led by 9 after the first, but this was just another low-scoring, back-and-forth game.
Are you guys sensing a pattern?
So the pattern is clear. What we see now time and time again.
I mean, they're called the Grit and Grind Grizzlies for a reason. Game was tied at 80 with 5:25 left in the game, but then the Grizzlies just put the clamps down. They held the Clippers scoreless for the next 2 minutes of the game and started to pull away. Clippers actually nearly had a chance to win the game at the end, though. Randy Foye hits a clutch 3 with 3.7 seconds left, cuts the lead down to 2. You gotta get a foul and send someone to the line, and then they just don't. Mike Conley just runs around, eventually throws the ball up, and time expires. Come on now.
Eric Bledsoe couldn't chase down Mike Conley. He wasn't quick enough.
I mean, it wasn't like 1 second, 1.5. There was almost 4 seconds where they couldn't foul somebody.
What I find funny is I'm looking at Eric Bledsoe chase down Mike Conley. Like, I feel like he's within arm's reach.
You'd think.
And he doesn't even like try to like, you know, swipe at him. Like, there's sometimes the refs, even if you barely graze the guy, will call the foul because they know you're trying to foul. He doesn't even try.
Don't even dive at the feet or nothing.
Shoestring tackle.
Right.
Game 7 back in Memphis. The Grizzlies have pulled it back from a 3-1 deficit to tie the series at 3-3. This game, though, was an offensive disaster class from the Memphis Grizzlies. Rudy Gay and Marc Gasol were the only 2 players who I would say played well offensively, and they each scored 19 points. Mike Conley, Z-Bo, and OJ Mayo combined to score 20 points on 6 of 36 shooting.
God damn. I mean, they shot 32.5% from the field, were 0 of 13 from 3, and still had a 1-point lead going to the fourth. The game was 56-55. What? How How is that a possible score? Again, this doesn't seem real. Clippers, though, would outscore the Grizzlies 27-16 in the fourth to win by 10. 82-72 was the final score. Interestingly enough, though, the Clippers stars were kind of non-factors in the fourth. Blake and DeAndre Jordan both played less than 2.5 minutes. Chris Paul only played half the quarter, scored 2 points, but then Eric Bledsoe, Kenyon Martin, and Mo Williams all played most of the fourth, and Nick Young and Reggie Evans, of all players, played the entire fourth quarter.
Shout out to Reggie Evans.
That guy was scary.
Dude was a monster on the court, was terrifying, would gobble up rebounds, and he played weirdly well in this series.
Do we give the Clippers more credit for actually not blowing a 3-1 lead this time? I mean, Doc, he didn't blow it this time. Okay, Doc.
Well, their coach wasn't Doc, it was Vinny Del Negro.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense. That makes a lot more sense.
So to recap this season, you know, a bit of a disappointment considering they were coming off such a great season the year prior. You know, they had Rudy Gay back and the roster was basically fully healthy for the playoffs, barring Darrell Arthur. But to bow out to a Clippers team that would get swept by the Spurs in the next round, you gotta consider it a bit of a disappointment. Still a very good season, given the franchise history.
Yeah, it's another one of those seasons in the West where it was tough. I mean, you would have liked to beat Lob City Clippers in the first round, but that's a tough ask, so disappointment for sure, but not the worst season.
Definitely still felt like the team had a very bright future.
Oh, 100%.
So going into the 2012 NBA offseason, the first thing to address for the Grizzlies is that they were sold to a man named Robert Pira, who is the founder of Ubiquity Networks. Keep that in mind. In the draft, the Grizzlies only had the 25th pick, so they took Tony Roten. I mean, could have had Jay Crowder, could have had Draymond, could have had Chris Middleton, but hey, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, whatever. I mean, Tony Roten, he was in the NBA for a couple seasons, I think, so.
Yeah, he was fine.
Yeah, he was fine.
Yeah, they decided, yeah, we're gonna run it back with basically the same roster. I mean, they got Darrell Arthur back after he missed the entire season prior. They did sign Jared Bayless to a 2-year deal, but there was one big difference with the Grizzlies this year, and that was OJ Mayo. Keep in mind, they had selected him 3rd overall in 2008. He had become a pretty solid 6th man for them, and they didn't even sign him to an offer sheet.
I mean, I don't know the behind-the-scenes stories, but wasn't he suspended for PEDs?
Yeah, he had
1.2.
He had the drug suspension the year prior, but I mean, still, the kid's only 25 years old, and you're not even gonna sign him to an offer sheet, not even give yourself the opportunity to max. Like, they just let him walk for free. Well, the Grizzlies didn't seem to mind because they got off to a burning hot start. Sure, they lost their first game of the year on Halloween, a rematch against the Clippers, but after that, they ripped off 8 straight wins. They were 14-3 after 17 games. They even held the top seed in the West for a hot minute. I mean, they leveled off a little bit, but you know, they were still humming along. They were 4th place in late January.
And obviously, we all know why. Their defense was just locked down. As always, they boasted the #1 defense in the NBA. And their offense, you know, it was a slow pace, but it wasn't bad. You had balanced scoring with Rudy Gay, Zebo, Marc Gasol, and Mike Conley. But then out of nowhere at the end of January, they shipped off Rudy Gay to Toronto. This was shocking at the time.
I remember being in disbelief. It had been rumored, and I didn't get why it was rumored, but I remember seeing like Rudy Gay off to Toronto. Like, I mean, to me, the Grizzlies basically gave away their best player for not much. I mean, they got Ed Davis, Tayshaun Prince, and Austin Day right in the thick of a playoff race. They get back those 3 guys for their top scorer. I was in shock.
And then you look into it a bit deeper. It was a luxury tax cost-saving measure. I mean, the James Harden deal had just happened. This is one of the worst things in the NBA when the cheap-ass owner basically punishes the fans for nothing. Like, he wanted to be cheap, so he's like, I ain't paying that contract. So they sent out Rudy Gay.
Yeah, Robert Pera, the new owner we just mentioned, didn't want to pay that luxury tax bill. Thank God owners have kind of stopped doing this. Like, they've just realized, like, oh, we actually make a lot more money when our team is good.
Crazy.
So let's pay a little bit more to make our team good. Lionel Hollins was apparently lobbying real hard behind the scenes to keep at least his starting 5 together, but obviously he lost that fight. And this trade made it clear that the team going forward, they were going to focus on Mike Conley, Marc Gasol, and Zach Randolph, which, if you think about it, was a bit of a risk considering, I mean, Conley was young, but Zebo was 31 and Marc Gasol was 28.
I mean, I guess the logic behind it was they did much better in the 2011 playoffs when they didn't have Rudy Gay. Maybe they thought that would open up their offense a bit more, but like we said, just still a shocking move.
The trade, though, it proved to be a good one because the Grizzlies, they stumbled for a little bit, adjusting to losing their top scorer, but after that, won 14 of their next 15, finished the season with a 56-26 record, got the 5th seed in the Western Conference. By the way, those 56 wins wins would have been good enough for second in the East.
I mean, 56 wins, that's borderline good enough for like a first seed some seasons.
Would have been last year.
Yeah, that's crazy. Zebo made the All-Star team again as a reserve, and they finished dead last in pace and first in opponents' points per game because, of course, like, we knew that was gonna happen.
They call them grit and grind for a reason. Round one of the playoffs against the Clippers, obviously a rematch of the great series they had the year prior, this time with the seeds switched around though. Game one in Los Angeles, the Grizzlies never led. The Clippers held about a 5 to 10 point lead up until the fourth where they just blew the game wide open. They win 112-91. Jared Bayless led the Grizzlies in scoring with 19. That's how you know you're in trouble.
Yeah, that's not a good look, but game two was much more of a back and forth game. Mike Conley led the Grizzlies with 28. Chris Paul and Blake Griffin combined for 45. The Grizzlies trailed by 2 with 28 seconds left. And then there was this weird jump ball situation. There was 5 seconds on the shot clock. The Clippers won the jump ball, but then CP3 just didn't realize the shot clock didn't reset, so he had to force up just basically what was a half-court shot that missed everything.
A prayer.
Yeah, it was a prayer. Conley and Gasol ran a pick and roll in the next possession. Gasol got a wide open dunk, and the Grizzlies tied the game at 91.
But then, very next play, Chris Paul with Tony Allen on him. Tony Allen, the guy who had locked him up in the series the year prior. He gets into the lane a little bit. He gets a nice little floater off, and he banks it into the buzzer. It gives the Clippers a 93-91 win in game two. Just heartbreaking.
That game winner needs to get brought up more because it's a tough-ass shot.
It's a really tough shot.
It's not a deep shot. It's not like a fading mid-range shot, but shot difficulty on that was like 99.
Against one of the best defenders in NBA history.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of best defenders in NBA history, game three back in Memphis, the Grizzlies straight up suffocated the Clippers. Clippers only scored 82 points, shot only 38.8% from the field. They got bodied on the glass, 45-28. Also, what's interesting, the Clippers only shot 67 total shots in this game. Last time that happened in just the NBA was November of 2022, and it was also the Clippers.
Of course it'd be the Clippers. Zach Randolph led the Grizzlies. He had a 27-point triple-double. Gasol chipped in 16, and Quincy Pondexter added 13. In game four, once again, another just lockdown defensive performance by the Grizzlies. Even though the Clippers were getting locked up though, they only trailed by 4 going to the fourth, but then the fourth quarter gave us just a classic Clippers fourth quarter collapse.
Yeah, outscored 33-16 by the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies held the Clippers to only 30% shooting in the fourth, including 1 of 8 from 3 in the fourth. Grizzlies, on the other hand, shoot 62.5%. Grizzlies win 104-83, and all of a sudden, we got ourselves a 2-2 series heading back to LA. And game 5 in LA, my goodness. Zebo and Marc Gasol absolutely tortured Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan in this game. Zebo and Gasol combined for 46 points and 19 boards. Blake and DeAndre combined for 10 points and 13 boards. This was the series that Zach Randolph especially was just terrorizing Blake Griffin, and my God, he and Marc Gasol went out of their way in this game.
Honestly, it was so fun to watch.
It was amazing!
Because that Clippers front court was all the glitz and the glam, the big dunks and everything, and then Zach Randolph and Marc Gasol, just two tough-ass dudes, dominated them. I mean, Chris Paul did what he could. He had 35, but he was really the only Clipper that showed up. Jamal Crawford was the only other player in double digits. The Grizzlies took the lead late in the second quarter and just never looked back.
Yeah, Grizzlies win 104-93 and just another dominant defensive performance. Game 6, Blake Griffin didn't start this game due to a sprained ankle. He would play, but he only scored 9 points. This was also the game where Zebo, let's be honest, he tried to choke Blake on the ground.
He completely did.
He just did.
Again, it was amazing though.
It was hysterical. I mean, look, big props to Blake for never just cold cocking Zebo.
Yeah.
Because just about any other player in the NBA would have been like, I'm sick of this fucking guy. And just like, maybe not punched him straight up, but they would have got back in his face. And be fair to Blake, he kept his composure every single time.
Matt Barnes for the Clippers, he had the game of his life. He dropped 30 points, had 10 rebounds, but basically all of the main Clippers besides CP3 and Cron Butler played terribly, so the Clippers just couldn't keep up with that physicality.
Oh, this game too was a war. 59 total fouls, 33 by the Clippers, 26 by the Grizzlies. Memphis took 47 free throws. Chris Paul was ejected with 2 minutes to go. Ah, it's just beautiful basketball. I love it.
And what a revenge for the Grizzlies beating the Clippers.
So now the Grizzlies are on to round 2 against Oklahoma City, matched up with Kevin Durant and the OKC Thunder. Thunder were the top seed in the West, but they had lost Russell Westbrook in the first round of that torn meniscus at the hands of Pat Bev. Game 1 started off kind of slowly, 16-14 after after the first quarter in favor of Memphis.
How is that possible?
Early 2010s basketball. It's not quite as bad as early 2000s basketball, but it is much slower than what we have today.
Picked up a little bit in the second quarter, things got scoring. By the end of the third, the Grizzlies held a 9-point lead. Quincy Pondexter again came up big. He had a half-court shot. And in the fourth quarter, a random big three for the Thunder showed up. You had Kevin Durant, Kevin Martin, Derek Fisher combining for 24, and the Grizzlies as a team only scored 18.
Yeah, KD hit a mid-range jumper on a fast break with 11 seconds left to give the Thunder their first lead since early in the third. Then on the next possession, Marc Gasol, he threw a bad pass, turned it over. Grizzlies still had a chance after 2 Reggie Jackson free throws, and Quincy Pondexter actually got fouled on a 3, and then he bottled the first attempt.
Couldn't come up big on that one.
Came up big at the end of the third quarter, hitting that half-court shot, but couldn't hit 3 free throws in a row.
Game 2, incredibly back and forth game. 12 ties, a whopping 27 lead changes, and of course the game was tied at 91 with 2:41 to play, but from that moment, the Thunder just straight up crumbled. Mike Conley was hitting some clutch shots, and the Grizzlies pulled away to win 99-93.
Yeah, KD had 36 to lead the Thunder, and Derek Fisher chipped in 19 off the bench, but the Grizzlies, I mean, you get double digits from Gasol, from Randolph, from Conley, from Tony Allen of all players. That'll help you even a series up. Game 3, not the best offensive showing for the Grizzlies. They only scored 87 points on 40.5% shooting, 28.6% shooting from 3, but this was the real secret to the Memphis Grizzlies. They didn't have to play well on offense, because they would make sure you didn't play well on offense. They held the OKC Thunder to only 81 points.
This team's ridiculous. I know it was the era, it's different than modern NBA basketball, but winning playoff games where you score 87 points, that should never happen. Incredible defensive performance by this Grizzlies team.
Game 4, it looked like the Thunder were going to get back in this series. They had a strong start, built a 17-point lead late in the second quarter. Grizzlies battled back though, eventually took their first lead late in the third. Game was back and forth in the fourth quarter, but the Grizzlies held a 2-point lead with only 10 seconds to play. KD hit a driving layup with only 6 seconds left, and then Zach Randolph's game-winning attempt was blocked clean by Serge Ibaka, so we're off to overtime. And in OT, the Grizzlies had a 3-point lead with 21 seconds left, but Derek Fisher surprisingly threw a really bad inbounds pass, got stolen by Tony Allen. Not the guy you'd think would be making that mistake late in a game like that.
Yeah, Derek Fisher at this point was pretty damn washed up, but you want to talk about dudes with playoff experience, Derek Fisher's the guy, so shocking move by him. Grizzlies take a 3-1 lead going back to OKC. Game 5, obvious do-or-die game for the Thunder. First quarter, it was pretty back and forth, but the Grizzlies took a double-digit lead with a dominant second quarter. The Thunder, though, were never really able to fully close that gap, and a pair of Tony Allen free throws with just 3 seconds left would put the final nail in the coffin of the Thunder season.
Yeah, Grizzlies win 88-84. Gotta keep in mind, the Thunder averaged nearly 106 points per game in 2013. That was third best in the NBA. The Grizzlies held the Thunder under 100 in every game this series, and under 90 twice. I know they didn't have Russ, but still, that is how good this defense was.
Under 100 every game, crazy, and then under 90 twice. That's just lockdown.
So the Grizzlies are off to their first ever Western Conference Finals. They got to face the San Antonio Spurs, the same team they beat in the first round only 2 years prior. In game 1, they got shellacked. They were down by 17 after the first quarter, ended up losing by 22. It was never really close. Game 2, though, looked like it was headed the same way as game 1. The Spurs were up by 18 with 7 minutes to go in the third. Grizzlies managed to cut it down to 12 going into the fourth, and then put on one of the most dominant defensive performances in a quarter that you'll ever see.
I mean, they held the Spurs, the 2013 Spurs, one of the best offensive teams ever, to 9 points in the fourth quarter on 4 of 19 shooting.
Insane.
That dominant defense allowed them to slowly claw their way back into the game and eventually send the game to overtime, even despite trailing 7 points with under a minute to play. But in overtime, though, roles reverse, and the Spurs just completely shut down the Grizzlies.
Yeah, Grizzlies only scored 4 points on 2 of 12 shooting. Now look, they only held the Spurs to 8 points, which is pretty good. 8 points in an overtime period, that's great, but you gotta get more than 4 points.
Yeah, it's borderline impossible to win an OT when you score 4 points on 12 shots.
Game 3 back in Memphis, the Grizzlies got off to a hot start in front of their home crowd. They led by 16 after the first quarter. Over the course of the game, though, the Spurs just managed to chip away at the lead over time. Eventually took a lead early in the fourth quarter. Game was tied at 86, though, at the end of regulation, and Mike Conley missed a last-ditch attempt, so for the second straight game, we go to overtime, and in OT, the Spurs shot 80%. 100%. You play such good defense for 48 minutes, and then just in a 5-minute OT period, you get beat down 18-7.
I mean, back-to-back overtime losses. Those are the type of losses, like, if they win that game too, who knows how this series could have gone, but goddamn, as a fan, that is awful. Game 4, the Spurs would get off to a strong start. They lead by 10 after the first, and basically never looked back. The Grizzlies chipped away a bit. They got it down to 4 at one point, but they'd end up winning 93-86, sweeping the Grizzlies. Tony Parker was absolutely unstoppable.
I tell you, for all the young bloods watching this video right now, go look up prime Tony Parker highlights.
The dude was like, what, 6'1", maybe?
If that.
And somehow just consistently scored in the paint, was literally a pick and roll maestro.
I mean, he scored 37 points on 15 of 21 shooting against this Grizzlies defense.
And again, it was the Spurs flipping it back on the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies known for that shutdown defense, and 93 points besides Tony Parker torching them is pretty good, but the Spurs held them to 86 and they'd advance to the NBA Finals.
So to recap the 2013 season, obviously, you're disappointed by getting swept by the Spurs, a team that you had beaten only 2 years prior, although important to mention that Spurs team didn't have a guy by the name of Kawhi Leonard, so bit of a change, but still, by far the most successful season in Memphis Grizzlies history.
Yeah, incredible season, 56 wins, you advance to the conference finals. Like I was saying earlier, this Spurs team was very good, so no shame in losing.
That's an understatement.
Yeah.
Also, it's kind of interesting to think about, like, this was the most successful season in Memphis Grizzlies history. Their previous most successful season was arguably just 2 years prior. So this was very much a team that was on a upward trend.
Yeah, it felt like they just needed to get a bit better on offense. The defense was there, but they were not going anywhere anytime soon.
So the Grizzlies at this point are coming off their best season in franchise history. They're flying high. Sure, they didn't make the NBA Finals, but I mean, for a team that had barely even scraped past the first round to get all the way to the conference finals was incredible. And they started the offseason by not renewing the contract for head coach Lionel Hollins.
Yeah, that's a questionable move.
Downright stupid is what I would call it.
I mean, it has worked in the past. Remember Dwayne Casey won Coach of the Year and still got fired? But yeah, you're right. That is a crazy ass move.
I mean, considering Hollins was easily the most successful coach in franchise history, it's not even close. And the whole story behind it is, and this is really one of my least favorite things in all of sports, it's that he had, clashes with management who favored a more analytical approach when it came to roster construction. I mean, the big example that we mentioned earlier was Hollins was a big opponent of the Rudy Gay trade, even though Memphis played better on both ends after they got rid of him. And look, okay, he was wrong about that. That's fine. The dude still led you to your best season you had ever seen. And I hate it when stuff like this happens. I mean, it's like the 49ers fired Jim Harbaugh. Why? Because he got on the GM's nerves. Like, grow up, guys. You're all adults. You're trying to win games, and you're just gonna let this guy walk out the door because you guys don't see eye to eye on everything?
I agree. They promoted Dave Yeager to be head coach. He was an assistant coach previously on the team. Kind of a rare move in the NBA to promote within, but I felt like it worked pretty well. They didn't have their first round pick, so they selected Jamal Franklin, whoever the hell that is, in the second round.
Got nothing on that one.
And then besides that, it was a really uneventful offseason for the Grizzlies. They brought in Mike Miller, former Grizzlies player. He was coming off that one-shoe series with the Heat, so, there's that. And then they brought in James Johnson, but yeah, that's not much for an offseason.
And in turn, they got off to a pretty horrible start. I mean, Marc Gasol missed 22 games early in the season with injury, but the Grizzlies, they started 10-15 after 25 games. They lost Quincy Pondexter for the season in December when he suffered a stress fracture in his left foot. After that, they treaded water until early January, where they finally went on a run, winning 11 of 12 games to get 6 games above 500. No All-Stars this year for the Grizzlies, though, and at the trade deadline, they did bring in Courtney Lee. And also, I mean, James Johnson, not exactly the most interesting offseason signing, but he did have some highlight dunks for them, I will say.
They did finish the second half of the season very strong. They went 29-12 during that period. Finished the season with 50 wins still, 50-32. Their offensive rating actually improved quite a bit, 1.4 points, but their defensive rating, it slipped big time. It slipped down 4 points. And their 50 wins, again, you think that's a good seed? Nope, you're getting the 7th seed with that.
I mean, Dallas won 49 wins, and they would have been the 3rd seed out east.
Brutal.
Awful. Also, of course, the Grizzlies were dead last in pace, because of course they were.
They have to be. Zebo, Marc Gasol, of course they were. 4.
Round 1 of the playoffs, they got a rematch of the Western Conference semifinals from the year prior against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Although, big difference is the Thunder had Russell Westbrook back and healthy. Also, worth noting, this was the 3rd time in 4 years the Grizzlies had played the Thunder in the playoffs, so definitely a familiar opponent. And in Game 1, OKC kind of dominated. They led by 22 at halftime. The Grizzlies did get it down to 2 in the 4th quarter, but after that, the Thunder immediately went on a 13-1 run and they never looked back.
Game 2, though, definitely much more of a back and forth game. They really keyed in on Russ and KD, who did go for 65 points, but they did that on only 23 of 56 shooting. 3:20 left, Westbrook gets a steal and a breakaway dunk. It cuts the lead down to 1. Next possession, Mike Conley would airball a 3, but Zebo got the board, and he got an and 1 to silence the crowd. OKC would take the lead back, though, with a KD breakaway dunk. And on the next possession, of course, there's a scramble. And who else but Mike Miller gets a wide open 3 to give the Grizzlies the lead back?
Had to be Mike Miller.
Of course it was Mike Miller, and of course he was gonna hit it.
Dude's a low-key, really great clutch shooter.
He is. He 100% is.
Craziest play of this game, though, for me was undoubtedly KD's falling down 4-point play. I mean, at this point, Thunder are down 5, Hope's starting to run out, and after just a mad scramble, KD gets the ball in the corner and shoots a 3 as he's falling down. I mean, I remember watching this live and just being in complete and utter shock that he could just get the ball to the rim, period. I mean, I tried to recreate this shot in my backyard so many times, and I could barely get the ball to the rim.
I swear they had that play like every single moment on SportsCenter, or even if you just look up like best playoff plays or most hyped crowd reactions, you might still see that play to this day. It's that iconic.
I mean, it's one of those plays where up to that point, I don't think we'd ever seen a play like that.
No, I can't really think of another play like that just in general to this day.
That play cut the lead down to 1. On the next possession, Mike Conley hit 1 of 2 free throws, so the Thunder still had one last chance. Russ, of course, had to throw up a terrible 3 because that's what he does, but Kendrick Perkins gets the board, gets the putback layup at the buzzer to send the game to OT. Marc Gasol honestly got caught ball watching. What is he doing at the free throw line?
Thought the play was over. He's like, we got the stop here, it's done, but you can't count out big man Kendrick Perkins. He's always there to bail his stars out.
I mean, just box him out, Mark, and he doesn't get the ball. Like, just tip it out. It's game over.
Yeah. In OT, the Grizzlies built up a 4-point lead with more than 2 minutes to play. Durant would respond with a 3 with 1:20 left to cut the lead down to 1. And then Durant, he gets to the free throw line, little more than 30 seconds left. Marc Gasol fouled him on that possession. He was done for the game, but he only hit 1 free throw. But KD, man, I mean, a great free throw shooter, only hitting 1 there? I don't know.
That's tough. And on the next possession, I mean, Zach Randolph, he got a layup off just a beautiful pass from Tony Allen. OKC gets the ball back next, but Serge Ibaka, a little pick and roll with KD, is called for a travel. Then on the next play, I mean, Russ nearly steals the ball after a ballsy pass by Beno Udrih, but he's also called for the foul, and the Grizzlies ice the game at the line, tying the series up at 1-1. Crazy end to game 2, and believe it or not, it actually gets better as the series goes along.
Game 3, fun fact about this game, going into it in Memphis, they were riding a 14-game home winning streak dating back to the regular season. They balled out early. They built up a 17-point lead in the second quarter. Thunder would come all the way back, though, tying the game at 85 after Russ just hit a wild 4-point play.
You know, I've watched this play back probably like 15, 20 times, trying to figure out if it's actually a foul or if Russ is just having like a spasm as he shoots the ball, because like he shoots the ball, and I mean, Tony Allen is a little bit in his landing space, although this was kind of back before the NBA really was emphasizing those fouls. So I'm like, was this actually a foul? But you know what? I'll give it to him.
Looks weird as hell, just wacky as hell, but yeah, I would say it's a foul, and clean and 1 for Russ. Credit to him.
Mike Conley on the next possession had a great look to win the game. I mean, he had a nice little left-handed layup, exactly the shot he probably wanted. It just rims out, and on the ensuing Thunder possession, KD gets, I mean, a tough shot, but honestly a pretty good look for him to win the game. Misses the rim completely, though, so we're off to overtime. Second straight game that's gone to overtime. And in OT, down 3 with 30 seconds left, Russ and KD both get pretty decent looks from 3 to tie the game, but they both miss, and the Grizzlies clear, and it looks like they're gonna win. Courtney Lee hits a free throw with 1.7 seconds left to put them up 4, so it's over, right? Then Tony Allen fouls Russ on a half-court shot.
You know, Tony Allen I would think of as like top-tier defensive IQ. What the actual fuck is he doing anywhere near Russ on this. You're up by 4.
Just go stand on the baseline.
Yeah, just go stand start heading to the locker room.
Sit on the bench.
It's over. Like, the shot came nowhere near to even hitting the rim, but like...
And even if it does, there's not enough time left.
But hypothetically, like, he fouls him there and then Russ somehow miraculously hits that shot. Maybe everything changes. Or even just with the free throws coming up, you never know what can happen.
Russ, though, he did go to the line to shoot 3 free throws with only 0.9 seconds left. He hits the first one, but he misses the second one short and then intentionally misses the third one. To be fair to him, it was a pretty good miss if they were down 2 and not down 3. But the Grizzlies escape with a 98-95 win. Game 4 started off back and forth, but the Thunder, they built a 14-point lead late in the third quarter. Grizzlies, of course, came back, took a 1-point lead with just under 4 minutes to play after a Tony Allen layup. I mean, down the stretch, it looked like the Thunder were in a lot of trouble. They were down by 5 with just a little more than a minute to play. And then Reggie Jackson gives you a personal 5-0 run to tie the game at 80.
Yeah, it really looked like the game was over, but Reggie Jackson, of course, just said, let me take over here real quick and get this tied up. Marc Gasol on the other end got a free throw line jumper. He missed that shot. Tony Allen then gets the rebound, also misses a putback. Reggie Jackson gets the rebound with 5 seconds left and then immediately chucks up like a full court shot. These moments when it happens in the NBA, so damn funny.
Dude went from master class to disaster class like that.
Imagine if he would have hit it, though.
Okay, well, if he would have hit it, it's the greatest shot in NBA history, arguably. It's also like one of the most pointless shots in NBA history because the dude chucked it with 4 seconds left. It's like that Matt Barnes buzzer beater.
Oh, yeah.
Where he shot it from half court
do that.
with too much time left. So, like, he made it, but it's like, okay, it worked, but why? So, we're off to OT. 3rd straight game in this series that went to overtime. OT, of course, was back and forth until the very end. Mike Conley had a look from mid-range to get the Grizzlies the lead with a little under 20 seconds left, but he missed. Thunder got the ball back, hit their free throws, and they would continue to hit their free throws to keep that lead at 3 until Mike Conley had a desperation 3-point attempt with only 3 seconds left. Honestly, credit to him. He got it really close to the rim considering how hard that shot is, but he missed. The Grizzlies' 15-game home winning streak is snapped. Thunder win 92-89, and we're heading back to Oklahoma City tied 2-2.
And at this point, you gotta think, like, it's impossible for these teams to have a bad game against each other. Like, this is basketball cinema happening right now.
They were allergic to it. Yeah. Keep in mind, only a couple years prior, they played a triple overtime game in the playoffs against each other.
And Game 5 was also another great one. Grizzlies led for the entire first half. They're up by as much as 14. In the third quarter, they pushed it up to 20. It's looking like we're finally gonna get a blowout. But nah, after the Grizzlies went up 72-52, the Thunder would close the quarter on an 18-4 run to make it a game. They would take the lead midway through the fourth with a KD 3. The Grizzlies would take the lead back and led by 2. And they actually had the ball with 30 seconds left after Tony Allen missed a free throw. Looked like it was over again, but again, there's gotta be some chaos happening this series at all time. And Russ just straight up strips Mike Conley, gets a wide open dunk on the other end. Okay, Russ, like making a play on defense? Like he's not known for that, but Russ was athletic back in the day and he could play defense back then.
Rips him clean too.
Oh yeah, he does.
Absolutely clean. Grizzlies had one final chance and Zebo actually made a shot at the buzzer after a great assist from Marc Gasol, but it was well after the buzzer. So 4th straight game, we are off to overtime. Absolutely ridiculous. And in OT, game's tied at 98. Mike Conley gets the rim, gets a little right-handed layup to give the Grizzlies a lead. Next possession, KD gets to the line, makes his first free throw, and as he's about to shoot his second one, good old Joey Crawford comes sprinting in, stops him, because apparently something's wrong with the scoreboard or something, I don't know. There's a 33-second delay until Durant shoots his next free throw, and of course he misses it. I remember this being a huge controversy at the time. Thunder fans especially were out for blood with Joey Crawford.
I mean, dude literally iced him. He iced the free throw shooter
for
like no reason. I swear they didn't even change the time like on the game clock. Like nothing happened. And I feel like no other referee's doing that besides Joey Crawford.
No.
I gotta be, and the way he did it too, of course he had to live up to the theatrics and just be like, no,
sprints out to him and rips the ball away from him.
I mean, I don't blame Thunder fans. Like that was ridiculous.
KD got one more chance though at a game winner, but he missed a 3, although it did look like Serge Ibaka had one of the craziest putback buzzer beaters you will ever see, but just like in regulation, upon further review, the ball is still in his hands, so the Grizzlies win 100-99. They take a 3-2 lead in this series, and if you remember, this is the game that led the Oklahoman to call KD Mr. Unreliable in the paper the day after. Durant hadn't played particularly well over the past 2 games. He'd only shot in 15 of 45. He'd missed some big shots, obviously the 3 at the end, the free throw a couple of sessions before. And boy, this caused a stir. I mean, Durant tweeted about it. His mom tweeted about it. Sam Presti brought up charity work KD did in Oklahoma. It even got to the point where the Oklahoman had to issue an apology, stating that, quote, the words were overstated and unduly harsh.
My only thing with this is, if you're in New York, you're in LA, you can get away with that. Oklahoma City, this is all they got. They just got this team. KD is on his MVP season. I kind of get the outrage, but the fact that they had to apologize for that,
that's a bit much.
It's crazy.
So game 6 back in Memphis, chance for Grizzlies to pull off a shocking upset of, again, KD, the Thunder. This is MVP year, one of the title favorites, and they got thumped. They didn't lead after the 10-minute mark of the first quarter. The Thunder cruised to a 104-84 win. KD dropped 36 and the Grizzlies only shot 37%, so we're heading back to Oklahoma City for a game 7.
Yeah, KD saw that article and said, okay, I'm gonna show you.
He does this a lot.
Yeah, I'll show you what's up.
Also worth noting that Zebo was going to be suspended going into game 7 for this push-punch combo on Steven Adams. This is a really soft suspension. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he did go for the neck, upper area there, so maybe the NBA decided that's why, but when you say Zach Randolph punched Steven Adams, I'm expecting way worse.
Right, we were doing research for this. I saw, punch Steven Adams. I'm expecting a roundhouse.
Exactly.
This is nothing.
Game 7, the Grizzlies got off to a hot start after that tough loss, and they played pretty well offensively, but kind of shocking for this Grizzlies team, the Thunder just dissected their defense. They shot over 60%, including 11 of 19 from 3, and scored 120 points. That was the most points the Grizzlies conceded all season. Credit to the Grizzlies, with their offense, they kept it close in the third, but at that point, the Thunder pulled away, and in the fourth quarter, it was a 20-point game, and the season was over. Thunder win 120-109, advance to the second round, and you gotta say, they did play the Thunder tough, a much better team, but that's a disappointing season for the Grizzlies.
Oh yeah, coming off your first conference finals, you take a huge offseason gamble by parting ways with your head coach, the most successful coach in franchise history, and not only do you get bounced in the first round, you're up 3-2 with a game 6 at home, and you get thoroughly beaten down in game 6 and game 7. So definitely not the season they were hoping for.
Yeah, gotta get it done in that game 6, but as always, as we've said throughout this video, the Western Conference is just tough out there. You don't expect them to beat the Thunder. It's hard either way.
So the 2014 offseason started out for the Grizzlies by drafting Jordan Adams out of UCLA. Adams would end up playing 32 total games for the Grizzlies, and they could have had Rodney Hood, Clint Capella, Kyle Anderson just in the next couple of picks. Another miss, honestly.
Yeah, they eventually got Kyle Anderson to play for them.
Yeah,
so
that is true.
There's that, but yeah, that's not a good pick. I've never heard of this dude.
They also signed Vince Carter, re-signed Bano Udrih, and they lost James Johnson, Ed Davis, and Mike Miller all in free agency. I'm not exactly sure what I expect the Grizzlies to do in free agency. It's not like when we were talking about the Clippers where it's they can sell LA, they can sell playing with Chris Paul and Blake Griffin and all this whatnot. I'm not exactly sure what I expect them to do in free agency, but another underwhelming offseason.
The only move I like is picking up Vince Carter.
Yeah.
You get another scorer, veteran. He still had surprisingly a lot more left in the tank than we would have thought. But besides that, like you said, yeah, pretty underwhelming.
Basically, it just seemed like they were going to run it back with just the same roster with 1 or 2 tweaks, and that's it.
Somehow, though, they came out the gate just burning hot. They won their first 6 games, 10 of their first 11, and 21 of their first 25. Both their offense and defensive ratings improved from last year. And this stat is so hilarious. They led the league in 2-point makes. We all saw that coming. And they were 29th in 3-point makes. They didn't like the 3-point ball. They're like, we're playing this old school ball. We don't give a shit.
Hey, I will say though, they were getting out on the fast break much more often because they went from dead last in pace to 26th in pace. They're embracing the modern game a little bit.
Okay, Dave Yeager had those boys running out there.
Had them huffing, begging for oxygen out there too. Grizzlies got only one All-Star this season. It was Marc Gasol. He was the West starting center. I do want to note that their owner, Robert Pura, he played in the All-Star Celebrity Game. dropped 13 points and his team got the win.
Okay.
I didn't know he had it like that.
We need more owners out there like Jody Allen, Steve Ballmer.
No, I don't want to see Jody out on the floor. Steve Ballmer, I would love. Jody, just keep cutting the checks.
Yeah, fair enough.
Mid-season, they did make one big trade. They traded for Jeff Green. They sent out Tayshaun Prince, Quincy Pondexter, a protected first-round pick, and a protected second-round pick. I mean, seems like a bit of an overpay for Jeff Green, but I mean, Tayshaun was old, Quincy was habitually injured, and I mean, I don't know what that first-round pick ended up becoming, so.
It's just another move where, does it improve the roster, like, slightly? I guess.
Sure.
But you're not making, like, you need a big move in the West at this point. You got the Warriors coming up, the Rockets, like, we need something bigger than that. Even without any big moves, though, they were keeping pace with the Warriors, and this was that 2015, like, breakout Warriors team that won 67 games. And even after that, once the Warriors kind of broke away from the pack, they kept that second seed for nearly 3 months, but Houston caught them just at the very end of the season.
And because of how divisions worked back in 2015, both them and the Spurs were knocked down a spot to make room for none other than the Portland Trailblazers, winning that Northwest Division with only 51 wins.
Is this the last time we won the division, 2015?
I think so. Wait, no, yeah, I think it is. Because in 2019, when we won 53 games, the Nuggets won the division.
2018, when we played the Pelicans, 3 seed?
Yeah, actually, I think it is 20.
Okay.
Yeah, we won it in 2017.
So
okay.
not quite the last time, but around there.
And still, 2017 was 7 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
How does every one of our videos just devolve into us complaining about the Blazers?
Hey, we'll do some more right here because the Grizzlies matched up with the Blazers in the first round. We were the higher seed, but they got home court. That's just how the rules worked. In game 1 and game 2 in Memphis, we just got smashed.
Yep.
In the mouth.
Game 1, we lost by 14, which doesn't sound that bad until you remember that we outscored the Grizzlies by 10 in the fourth quarter. We were down by 24 going into the fourth. Also worth mentioning, before game 2 in the Blazers locker room, apparently there was a sign displayed that said, "We don't lose to Spanish players."
What? It was written by Nick Batum, right? Because little like France versus Spain, like
rivalry
thing did cause a lot of controversy because, you know, that's a little xenophobic and also is pretty hypocritical because right before this, we had Rudy Fernandez and Sergio Rodriguez, fan favorites on the team.
2 of the most popular players in franchise history. And guess where they're from?
They're not going to hear anybody ringing, "Oh, Kenny the Jet Smith with a shot."
What is Spain?
They're from Spain.
They are from Spain.
If you couldn't tell by the name.
And in game 2, Blazers came out, took a 10-2 lead right away, and then crumbled from there. Like, middle of the second quarter, it was already a double-digit lead for the Grizzlies.
Yeah, the Blazers were a broken team. Like, we had Wesley Matthews out for the year. LaMarcus had a hand injury, and God, Zebo and Gasol were just giving LaMarcus the work, to be honest.
And in game 3, speaking of Zebo, first road playoff game in the Moda Center, Grizzlies immediately jumped out to an 11-3 lead, never relinquished it, got up by as much as 14 in the third quarter. They did lose Mike Conley in the third, though. He took an inadvertent elbow from CJ. Blazers were able to get it down to 3 in the fourth, but they never got closer. Grizzlies take a 3-0 lead. Game 4, no Mike Conley. He would actually be out for the rest of the series, and that allowed the Blazers to get their one consolation victory.
Yeah, I went to this game. Dame had a great game. He had a nice little spin move at one point. CJ and Myers Leonard were good off the bench, but like you said, just a consolation victory. We knew series was probably over game 5.
And over it was in game 5. Still no Mike Conley for the Grizzlies, but it still didn't matter. This was the one CJ breakout game. He scored 33 off the bench, but both Dame and LaMarcus were pretty terrible, and LaMarcus especially, we mentioned it earlier, this whole series was getting bullied down low by Zebo and Gasol. And what I'm about to say is just like the perfect encapsulation for this Grizzlies team. They shot 1 of 14 from 3, the Blazers hit 13 threes, and the Grizzlies won comfortably.
How is that possible? Like, even the math doesn't even seem logical there.
Because they just stopped us from hitting 2s.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
That's the name of the game.
Round 2, they'd match up with Golden State. Like I said, 67-win Golden State team. MVP Steph Curry, they were coming off a sweep of the Pelicans. And in game 1, they were still missing Mike Conley, which was a big miss because you need him to guard Steph. The Grizzlies only led for just a little over a minute in this game. Never led again. Warriors, on the other hand, led by as much as 20 and just cruised to a game 1 victory.
Yeah, game 2, the Grizzlies, they got Conley back. He was wearing the mask, of course, to protect his face, and they played great defense on Steph and Clay, held them to only 32 total points on 3 of 17 shooting from 3. Grizzlies, meanwhile, had a balanced attack. 4 players scored 15 plus, and they forced the Warriors into 20 turnovers and only 42% shooting. Tony Allen especially was clamping Steph and Clay, and he was making sure they remembered that he was first team all defense because he was just yelling that over and over and over at them.
I love that so much. Just mic'd up, just repeating it over and over.
First team all defense, first team all defense, just over and over and over and over again.
Grizzlies led by as much as 16 in the third. The Warriors did slowly kind of chip away a little bit, but they never got closer to 7, and the Grizzlies won 97-90 to even the series at 1 apiece.
Game 3, Clay and Harrison Barnes both played well, but again, the Grizzlies held Steph in check. 8 of 21 shooting, only 2 of 10 from 3. Gasol gave you 21 points at 15 boards. Zebo had 22 points of his own, and basically from the end of the first quarter, the Grizzlies led for the entire game. They won by 10 pretty comfortably. Game 4, Steph finally woke up from whatever coma he was in. He finally had a good game. Scored 33 points on 11 of 22 shooting. He also got good contributions from, Clay, Draymond, Iggy, the usual suspects. Grizzlies offense, meanwhile, was anemic. I mean, they held the Warriors to 101 points. That was 9 below their season average. But in this game, they shot 37.5% from the field and they only scored 84 points.
I mean, by the middle of the third, the Warriors had a 26-point lead, and the game was basically locked up at that point. You're not coming back from that on the 2015 Warriors.
Especially when you have a shitty offense.
Yeah, exactly. Game 5, back in Oracle, series tied 2-2. Huge game here. This game was close for literally just 1 quarter. From then on, the Warriors dominated. They entered the fourth with a 17-point lead. And again, same story kind of as game 4. The Grizzlies, on defense, they were pretty solid. They held the Warriors to 98 points, but somehow their offense was even worse than game 4.
Yeah, they only scored 78 points. And the most damning stat of this game is they got out-rebounded by the Warriors, 44-43. Zach Randolph and Marc Gasol were getting killed on the glass by Andrew Bogut, Draymond Green, and Festus Ezeli.
Unacceptable.
It is unacceptable. And their defense, again, on the Warriors was pretty good. 98 points, and no one really played particularly well, but you're not scoring 78 points and winning a basketball game in any era. Game 6, do or die game for the Grizzlies at home in front of their home fans. The Warriors immediately jump out to a 15-point first quarter lead. The Grizzlies, though, they kept pace. They cut the lead down to 1 late in the third quarter, but the very end of the third is where this game was lost for Memphis. They were down 5, had the ball on a fast break. So, you score here, it's a 1-possession game going into the fourth. Jeff Green, though, he takes a heavily contested 3 where he was blocked, although, maybe it could have been a foul. Crowd certainly wanted a foul. Everyone stops playing except for Steph, who gets the ball and chucks up a 60-footer and just squishes it. I mean, that is a massive momentum switch.
I mean, that's a dagger right there. Just the momentum there.
At the end of the third quarter, it's a dagger.
I mean, in the fourth quarter, it literally felt like one because the start of the fourth, 2 minutes had passed and it was obvious the Grizzlies weren't coming back. Warriors built up a 15-point lead and they'd eventually win 108-95 and advance to the conference finals.
So a definite bounce back year for the Grizzlies. Year 1 under Dave Yeager the previous year was definitely not what the Grizzlies have in mind, getting bounced in the first round. This year, you win 55 games, you're competitive in a really, really deep Western Conference, maybe the deepest it's ever been. You win a series in the first round and you take the eventual champs farther than anyone else did. But at this point though, this is what, the 5th year this core of players has been in the playoffs together. You kind of wonder, what's the ceiling at this point?
Yeah, like I said earlier in the video, it felt like they kind of needed to make a big move by now because the Warriors, the dynasty is up and coming. It started. You got other young teams coming up and their core at this point was kind of aging and it really felt like they hit their ceiling. Yeah, they can win a first round series against the Blazers, but once you get to the second round, third round, you're playing like the Spurs, the Warriors, just a different ball game at that point.
So in hindsight, really, the 2014-15 season was the last gasp for the grit and grind era because the next 2 seasons played out in basically the exact same way. It's low-key kind of freaky how similar they both are. Both seasons, the Grizzlies are playing pretty good ball before they just collapse late in the season. In 2015-16, they're 39-26. In mid-March, they're firmly the 5th seed. Then they lose Marc Gasol and Mike Conley to injuries that'll rule them out for the rest of the season. They go 3-14 in their last 17 games, end up with the 7th seed. They're swept easily supposedly in round 1 by the Spurs. They lose by an average of 22 points. After that season, they fire Dave Yeager. They bring in David Fizdale. They did make one big signing in the 2016 offseason, though. Chandler Parsons, 4 years, $94 million.
Just one of the worst contracts ever.
I know he's mentioned on podcasts because he was originally going to sign with Portland for the same contract, but it was mentioned on podcast that his agent was like, dude, if you go to Portland and take a physical, there's a chance they might fail you.
Yeah.
Because they've had bad luck with guys with injury histories, you know, Roy Oden and whatnot. So he was like, fuck it, I'm all in on Memphis grit and grind. He's talked about like going into the meeting and just Oscar performance, I think has how he described it. He's like, yeah, I'm grit and grind till I die.
And then in the next season, basically the same story, just this time minus the injuries. They were 36-25 at the end of February. That's only one game out of 4th place. No major injuries. Like I said, they just faded, going 7-14 in the last 21 games. Once again, they matched up with the Spurs. This time, though, a much more competitive series. They dropped the first 2 in San Antonio. They won game 3 at home. And then they also won game 4 at home in OT thanks to a Marc Gasol winner. But they dropped the next 2 and they lost the Spurs in 6. So their last glimpse in the playoffs, just the Spurs were able to take them out. Just they weren't quite the same team at this point.
And after the 2017 playoffs, the core of the grit and grind Grizzlies would start to slowly fall apart. In the 2017 offseason, they lost Zebo to the Sacramento Kings. Before he even signed for the Kings, by the way, the Grizzlies announced that his number 50 would never be worn again by another Grizzly. And then hilariously, they did the exact same thing like a couple months later when Tony Allen signed for the New Orleans Pelicans. Like 1 month later, they're like, nope, his jersey getting retired too.
Not the guys necessarily you'd expect to get retired, but I mean, as Blazer fans, we retire everyone's number.
Lionel Holland's number is retired for the Blazers.
I love to see it. Like these guys, Zach Randolph, I would say, star level player. Tony Allen, not as much, but they did so much for this franchise during that time.
2017-18, though, was a new low for the Grizzlies. David Fizdale lasted only a month. He was fired in late November. J.B. Bickerstaff was named interim head coach. That didn't turn anything around. Mike Conley played only 12 games due to injury and without Allen and without Zebo. The Grizzlies only won 22 games, second worst record in the NBA. They picked up Jaren Jackson Jr. with the 4th pick in the draft, and they were much better. The next year, they won 33 games, but at midseason, they traded Marc Gasol to Toronto. Of course, Gasol would go on to win the title with the Raptors that year. And then despite only having a 26% chance to land a top 4 pick and only a 6.3% chance to get the 2nd pick, that's what they ended up with. They selected Ja Morant, and at that point, the writing's kind of on the wall for Mike Conley.
Yeah, he was sent out on July 6, 2019. They traded him to Utah. They got back Grayson Allen, Jay Crowder, Kyle Korver, Darius Bazley, and a protected 1st-round pick. So this was the last member of that grit and grind era, finally leaving Memphis. And now on to the legacy. Like, they were one of the most iconic teams of the 2010s, maybe even more so than the Lob City Clippers. I mean, think of just the playoff battles they had. Like, they played the Clippers, the Thunder, the Spurs. So many great playoff series from this team.
I was gonna say, they didn't have playoff battles. They had playoff wars.
They did, yeah.
Like, not just against the same teams over and over. Like, they played the Clippers twice, the Thunder 3 times, they played the Spurs 4 times, but for the most part, they're all really good series. Like, against the Thunder especially, they played some epic playoff series against the OKC Thunder.
And what was really so memorable about this team is basically the entire NBA around them was moving to the 3-point era. Warriors were starting to come up at this time. Everyone was shooting threes. They were going more small ball lineups. And they were the one team that said, we don't give a shit. We're sticking with 2 traditional bigs. We'll beat you up inside. We'll play defense, and we're going to get wins the old school way.
And I tell you what, they did it as well as anyone. And I miss having a team like this in the NBA. Literally a team that no one else in the NBA wanted to play.
Yeah, they were so hard to beat. Just the defense, they would suffocate people. I mean, that 2015 playoff series against the Blazers.
We know all too well.
Yeah, they shut us down. And yeah, I miss a team like this. Like, the NBA needs, they don't have to have like 2 traditional bigs, but I just wish we had like a grind team that played defense, that just beat people up. Just doesn't really exist anymore.
That's the video, guys. How will you remember the grit and grind Grizzlies? I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, consider giving it a like, as it really does help us out. And while you're here, why not check out some of our other videos as well? And don't forget to subscribe to Synthetic Sports.